everybody, and welcome to Raising Vibrations and to the monthly forecasts. Hope you're doing well. And in today's video, I'm going to be helping you understand a little bit about aspects and phases. And this is my little piece on how I do my little forecasts in a unique way. So aspects and phases is a way that evolutionary astrology uses to measure the cycles that planets have in relationship to themselves, okay, and to other planets, pardon me. So what happens is you've got two planets, say for instance Pluto and Venus, and what evolutionary astrology will do is they will take those two archetypes and measure the relationship that they have between each other, and then from that measurement and from that relationship establish what type of phase and what type of evolutionary condition those planets carry within each other. And it's really fascinating because when you begin to measure your planets in relationship to other planets, you begin to see the development of how you actually experience your life through these aspects and phases. Now, I've got a little slideshow over here quickly that I want to show you in terms of what is the philosophy behind aspects and phases and what type of methodology do we use to actually measure this, okay? So I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so what you're looking at is two pictures. On the left-hand side over here, you can see this is about life itself, okay? The first thing that we understand is that everything is in a cyclic formation. Everything is moving through time and space. And so because of that, it is not separate that when you look at two planets or three planets in a birth chart, that they are also in this life cycle. There is a life cycle that each planet has. And each planet in relationship to another is reflecting where that life cycle is. It's no different than measuring a new moon, a first quarter moon, a last quarter moon, and a full moon. They're exactly the same thing. We just do it with planets now. And you can see that when you have a new moon, there's a new intention. When you have a full moon, we're coming into a halfway completion cycle. Again, phasal relationship and life, how it's evolving. The picture on the right-hand side reflects to us that everything is in relationship to everything else. Everything. Okay, it's like a revolving door. The moment that you walk through a revolving door, as you're moving outward, somebody from the outside is coming inward, and that door is revolving us around it. And it's like as one energy moves outward like that, another one's moving in. And everything is in a consistent relationship with everything else. And so because of that, it's natural for us to understand that when we look at planets in our birth chart, there's a natural cycle in terms of awareness, and there's a natural phasal relationship that exists between planets. And when we measure that, what we get is this beautiful harmonic dynamic of where we are in our consciousness and how that has been developed. Okay? And the next thing is how do we actually then establish and what methodology do we use in order to understand these aspects and phases? Well, in evolutionary astrology, you work with the planets, okay? So you've got Mercury, Venus, you've got Mars, you've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, okay? And then you have the sun. Now, in this diagram, everything revolves around the sun. So when you measure something in evolutionary astrology terms, there's always a focal point, right? There's a focal point, and there's always a planet that's in relationship to that focal point. And the way that you understand what focal point you have to look at, you understand the relationship that these planets have to the sun. So the sun will always be a focal point, okay? So when you say, for instance, want to understand the phasal relationship between Neptune and Jupiter, well, then it has a little bit of a different cycle, but still the same. When you measure planets in relationship to each other, you're measuring the fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. The fastest moving planet in relationship to the slowest moving planet. So therefore, if I had to say, for instance, ask you, what is the phasal relationship between Jupiter and Neptune? You would go, Jupiter is the fastest moving planet, Neptune's the slowest moving planet, and so therefore, Neptune would be your focus point. Because the slowest moving planet is always the focus point. And that's the key that I want you to take away from this conversation. When you measure aspects and phases in your chart, you're measuring two things. One, if you're measuring it against the sun will always be a focus point. So you're always looking for the focus point. And that will always be the sun if you're comparing it against something. Secondly, if you're comparing two planets with each other, you always measure the slowest moving planet as the focus point. So what happens now is you go, okay, I've identified that Neptune is the slowest moving planet. Jupiter's in relationship to it. And so then how do I understand how this works? Very simple. You get a little chart. And this is courtesy of the Evolutionary Astrology glossary, an ebook. And as you can see here on the chart, you've got this whole entire thing. New phase, crescent phase, first quarter phase, gibbous phase, all these phases. And each phase represents an aspect of development. So what you would do is you would take your slowest moving planet and put it at the 0. You would take your fastest moving planet and mathematically calculate the degrees of separation. Okay, so if Neptune's here and Jupiter, say for instance here, you would see that Jupiter is exactly 90 degrees, 90 clicks away from Neptune. And by understanding that phasal relationship, you would go, okay, it's a crisis in action square. And this is what I love about it so much. When we look at squares in astrology, we're like, oh, it's a square. But in EA, there's two types of squares. There's a crisis in action square and a crisis in consciousness square. And they're remarkably different in the sense. Okay, so you can actually try and read your chart. So I've got Pluto square Mars as an example. The way that Pluto square Mars is going to work in your chart, if it was crisis in consciousness versus crisis in action, are going to be remarkably different. Now, when you have that power within your own awareness to apply that to your chart, you can actually see what you're specifically looking at in terms of your evolutionary development. And it's really, really fascinating. So the next time you begin to understand your chart in terms of aspects and phases, I highly encourage you to learn about aspects and phases, to go and investigate it. And part of my astrology school, I actually teach this when I educate anybody that's wanting to understand evolutionary astrology. So this is something that when you really want to get into astrology, it's something you don't like miss because it's so empowering. I'll give you a quick example again, just before we jump into this, okay? Let's say, for instance, I have Jupiter and I'm measuring Mars and Jupiter, okay? We know that Jupiter is the slowest moving planet in relationship to Mars. So Jupiter stands there. And we will say that Mars is exactly 300 degrees, okay, away from Jupiter. In other words, Mars has gone all the way around the astrology chart like that because it's moving in that motion. And it gets all the way to that 300 degrees over there. Now, Mars is what is called in a last quarter phase in relationship to Jupiter. So when you look at Mars and Jupiter in the chart and you understand that phasal relationship, you can actually see that the soul's desires in this lifetime, this is the evolutionary astrology, the soul's desires in this lifetime are actually evolving through individuating, in other words, finding and breaking out of the mold of belief systems that they used in the past and allowing us to see perspectives from different unique points of views. That's the way that Mars and Jupiter in a very plain way would be operating in somebody's chart. Now you come into a world that is very like homogenized and very sort of like this is how truth is and this is what it's got to be, and you put somebody in that's natural tendency is to not follow those rules. Can you begin to see the way that we as human beings are so complex? That's why we have a lot of people in the world saying, well, I'm an atheist, because most of them have got phasal relationships that are breaking down, that are not listening to the general consensus. How much do we accept other people for having their own evolutionary degree? We don't understand it, so therefore we judge it. And this is the type of dynamics that we can get into when we understand more of who we are as a human race to alleviate the chaos that we've got. Food for thought. Hello, my Cancer friends, and welcome to the sun sign forecast for the month of March 2017. I hope you're well. And as always, I hope you enjoyed the introduction video around the nature of aspects and phases and how evolutionary astrology maps the ways in which we are moving through cycles and where our evolution is actually in relationship to planets and so on. And of course, if you're interested in actually wanting to learn more about evolutionary astrology, I've got a course starting on the 11th of March. So this astrology course will basically give you the fundamentals of how to not only read a chart, but also be able to understand karmic dynamics. Okay. So in the description below is a link to sign up for that. Or if you feel like you want to just write me an email and ask me some questions before you participate. I'm super happy with that as well. Okay. All right. So let's see what's going on for you, Cancers. Your first attention that we're going to look at is Pluto. And Pluto is moving through your 7th house, your solar 7th house, Cancer. And what that means for you is that you've been watching and experiencing relationship dynamics. And since 2008, relationships have really been changing for you. You might have experienced some intense experiences of maybe loss or abandonment or old dynamics just ending for you. Or you felt a deep sense of commitment to relationship in which you've, deeply merged with another in a way that's been profoundly supportive for you. Either way, the way in which you relate to yourself and the way that you see other people, the way that you see how relationships are playing out as fair and not fair, have really been in front of you. And of course, you're basically getting a powerful education around this. So with Pluto moving through your 7th house, I feel it's really, really good to pay attention to Jupiter. And Jupiter is moving through your 4th house of your solar 4th house. And of course, what that means for you is that you're watching deeply around your home. I wouldn't be surprised if you're decided to move or you find it really, really small in your home. Either way, you're really expanding the nature of your home, finding a new way of emotionally connecting with your home, okay, with the mother, developing a strong relationship maybe to your mom or to your parents or grandparents, whoever raised you in a nurturing way. And you're watching how those dynamics are playing out. Like what constitutes essential nourishment? Those would be the questions that Jupiter is really showing you. How do you nourish yourself? How do you look after yourself on a food level? And giving you a deeper sense of connection around how you can now inwardly relate to yourself in new ways as you begin to see relationship dynamics play out for you. So this is a big area for you where you're going to see yourself grow in your sense of identity, your sense of emotional relationship to people. If we go ahead and look over at the Pisces stuff that's happening in your solar 9th house, you've got Chiron, the Sun, Mercury, Neptune, and South Node. And of course, a lot of this has been the nature of your perception of reality, your truth. And this truth that you've been using as a way to relate to the world, your cosmology, your higher education, So I wouldn't be surprised during this month you've really found it interesting to maybe want to travel, or you've seen people traveling a lot, or you've been really looking at the way in which we see ourselves as different cultures. And of course, that dynamic has really been influencing the perception of different cultures, different ways of doing things, different perspectives, and maybe even looking at the nature of your cosmology that you have. And of course, that's always going to be connecting to your sense of identity, how you inwardly relate to yourself, how other people then relate to you, and what type of perception of truth do you use to facilitate those two dynamics. Okay. Now, if we go over and look into the actual planetary systems that are taking place, March is all about Venus retrograde. It's all about getting in touch with your essential needs and how are your essential needs being met. Okay, what type of value systems have you been using in the past that no longer support you anymore? And for you, of course, this is your relationship dynamics. This is your emotional relationship to your home. How you come home. What is the natural path in which you come home? Do you cook yourself food at night and then kind of like just chill out? Do you have a certain sleep routine? All these types of things are deeply embedded within this Jupiter experience. And of course, you're going to be looking at what are the absolute essential needs. So Venus goes retrograde on the 4th and 5th of March, 2017. And you can see it over there in the chart. And that's in your solar 10th house. So of course, alongside Mars, alongside Uranus, as you can see right next to each other, Mars is in a new phase relationship to Venus, to Uranus. And Uranus is in a balsamic phase to Venus. Completion, new beginnings. And this is what this month is about. Completion, new beginnings. So for you, it's a life direction. It's the way that you inwardly identify with yourself. How do you make choices in your life that allow you to follow your sense of direction in life, okay? These things are changing for you on a deeply personal level. So with Venus going retrograde and looking at your essential needs, we're going to be looking at how you're breaking down what I've been speaking about earlier in this conversation with you. So on the 9th of March, we've got Mars entering Taurus. And as Mars enters Taurus, it connects with the archetypes that are relating to Venus. Taurus and Libra, which is where Jupiter is, are co-ruled by the planet Venus. And Venus reflects the inward relationship to ourselves and the outer way in which we relate to other people. Does everybody get that process? Yeah? So when Mars goes into Taurus, it instinctually begins to allow us the process of inwardly seeing ourselves. We're instinctually exploring our own needs. And as we do that, we begin to then start to unveil all of what Venus retrograde is going to be for us in this month. So as that happens, we begin to take on a full moon on the 12th of March. And this full moon is a very big deal for us, okay? When we had the solar eclipse that happened in Pisces, okay, look around what happened to you. Look around what was taking place for you in your life at that stage, okay? That solar eclipse will bring you intense insight into what this full moon is going to be like for you on the 12th of March. And like I've told everybody in their videos, when you read a book that has full of insights, you don't strap it to your body as a way of remembering those insights. You simply put the book down and you go about your day. And so this is exactly the same thing that's happening for us right now. We had a lot of things happen for us on the solar eclipse in Pisces that we're dissolving and letting go. We got an intense amount of insight. And now we're putting the book down from the past evolutionary cycle and we're letting it go and we're bringing with us the insights. So as we begin to bring with us and see these new insights, we begin to see where our essential needs, Venus retrograde, are no longer supporting our journey anymore. And as we begin to get deeper in that process, we begin to understand, okay, this is not what I need for my new direction anymore. It's not supporting me, okay? And that's what this full moon is going to be for us as we begin to integrate these new insights and begin to purge old identity structures that no longer support us anymore. So on the 20th of March, if you can see over here, the sun moves into your solar 10th house, and it of course moves into the constellation Aries. And again, like I said, the theme, completion, new beginnings, completion, new beginnings. So Mercury is now in Aries, the sun is now in Aries, and we have had that full moon, okay? So what's happening here for us is that the next layer of instinctual new direction is going to be playing out for us. And as that new instinctual direction plays out for us and exploration and wanting to be free in this area, we'll begin to see what we need to let go that's holding us back. And as we begin to purge that process, we see the old essential needs die and the new ones begin again. And for you, of course, that's around your life direction. What is important for me? My career? Where do I want to go with my life? What do I want to do with my time? Saturn and the moon's conjunct Saturn there. Can you see it? What do I want to do with my time? What do I want to do with my life direction? Okay, so that's going to be happening for us on the 20th. And then, of course, on the 22nd, I feel like it's a really big day because look at all these squares that are taking place. Pluto conjuncts the moon. And, of course, we have Mercury making a square, Uranus making the square to all of this stuff here. And, of course, Jupiter is involved in this in a big way. And again, this Pluto conjunct the moon is going to give us the emotional power to break down all of those essential needs. And as those fracture, as those break down, we'll begin to see another beautiful thing manifest. Look at this. Okay, the moon's slowly approaching the south node and bang. The moon hits the south node on the 25th of March and the sun has now hopped over and switched places with Venus and letting go, new beginnings. So on the 25th, as Pluto gave us the power to break down the old patterns, on the 25th, we will let go of those old patterns. We'll say thank you very much for all of your experiences, and we'll begin to go, yes, let's go in this new direction. We'll feel that drive. We'll feel that energy to go like, yes, this is no longer working for me anymore. And then, of course, as soon as that takes place, we have a new moon in Aries. And that's a big deal for us because as that new moon hits for us on the 28th of March, we begin to then say, okay, I don't want that anymore. I'm done. The completion cycle of letting go is finished. I want to go in this new direction. I want to break free. I want to explore this new sense of liberation that I feel so strongly about. Okay? And as that begins to take place, you'll notice that Venus slowly but surely begins to creep into Pisces. And I think around about the 2nd or 3rd of April, Venus will be in Pisces. And that's when we'll begin this final process of because remember, the beginning of the month was essential needs, frustration, aha, liberation, inspiration, and liberation. That's how this process is going to be around what are your essential needs. And again, those essential needs are doing what? They're inspiring you to figure out what is right for you right now in your life relative to what dreams you have. And for you, Cancers, it's all about new relationship dynamics. For you, it's all about work. It's all about the way that which you like to follow through with your dreams. What life direction do you want to have? And how is that deeply connected to your sense of identity that is changing deeply within inside of you? Okay? So this is a powerful month for you in terms of life direction, and this is where it's really going to happen, okay? All right, my Cancer friends, I hope you have a fantastic month, and don't forget to check out the beginner's course or the astrology course. And other than that, take care. Bye-bye.